The night is deep, my friends. Can you feel the chill creeping into your bones? I am Damien Tao. Welcome back to Netherwave Radio. Welcome back to the darkness. Tonight, we journey into the space between the living and the dead. Two true stories, both submitted by listeners who swear upon their ancestors that every word is real. These tales concern life and death, and what a person sees in those final moments before crossing over. You may choose not to believe, but when such things happen to someone you love, that cold dread will crawl from the soles of your feet straight up to the crown of your skull. Our first tale comes from a listener, a young man who witnessed his grandfather's final days. He wrote to me of the strange things that occurred in that sterile hospital room, things that defied explanation. In Chinese folk belief, there is a phenomenon called Fun Wang, literally, glimpsing the road. The elders say that when death approaches, the dying begin to see a path that leads to the other world. A road invisible to the living. The grandfather passed away just after 11 o'clock at night. In traditional Chinese belief, this hour the transition between the hour of the dog and the hour of the pig marks, the moment when yin and yang energies shift. The veil between worlds grows thin. Before that final night, the old man had been in the hospital for some time. The room reeked of that particular mixture, disinfectant and medicine, mingled together into something that smelled almost like death itself. The grandfather lay there with oxygen tubes in his nose. His chest rose and fell with tremendous effort, each breath seeming to drain his entire body of strength. Then one day, something changed. The old man began scratching at his nose, not gently, but with desperate urgency, as though trying to dig something out. The family assumed the oxygen tube was irritating him, but he had worn that tube for days without complaint. Why now? Why with such violence? Later, the elder relatives offered their explanation. They said the old man was smelling something. The scent of the Yellow Springs Road, the path to the underworld. A smell that only those with 1 foot already in the grave can detect. But the strangeness did not end there. In those final days, the grandfather developed another peculiar habit. He would lift his arm above his head, shielding his eyes as though staring into a bright sun, and gaze into the distance. His eyes would not focus on anything in the room. Instead, they fixed upon some point that no one else could see. The intensity of that stare was deeply unsettling. The young man and his father dismissed it at first. They reasoned that lying in bed for so long had made the old man's arms go numb. He was simply stretching, exercising stiff muscles. But when the young man mentioned these behaviors to an elderly aunt, her face went pale. "Your grandfather is Su Wanglu," she whispered. "He is glimpsing the road." The aunt explained that the dying can see the path to the other side unfurling before them like a scroll being unrolled. Some see yellow dust roads. Some see paths paved with ancient stone. Others see only an endless tunnel of absolute darkness. But regardless of what form it takes, the aunt said, once someone begins to glimpse that road, their time is running short. The day before his death, the grandfather's condition deteriorated rapidly. His mind began to slip. He no longer recognized the faces around his bed. And then he began to shout. Loud, desperate cries that echoed through the ward. He would drag out the final syllable of each word until it resonated through the walls. In the chaos of calling nurses and doctors, of desperate attempts at resuscitation, no one paid close attention to what the old man was actually screaming. The father turned to his son and asked, "Did you hear what your grandfather was shouting?" The young man shook his head. In all the commotion, he could not make out the words. But there was someone else in that room, a friend of the father's who had come to help. He heard every word clearly, yet he said nothing. He simply stood there, his face growing whiter by the minute. It was not until days later, after the funeral rites were complete, that this friend finally revealed the truth. He had kept silent, he said, because he feared what the words would do to the family in that dark hour. The grandfather, in those final moments, had been screaming 2 words over and over. "Open the door, open the door." His voice had been filled with panic and terror, the desperate cries of someone pounding on a door that would not yield. The friend explained what he had heard from village elders long ago. When a soul arrives at Tukimenguan, the Gate of Ghosts, which Westerners might understand as a kind of checkpoint to the underworld, sometimes the spirit guardians will not let them pass. The dying soul grows frantic. It can see the gate, but the way is barred, and so they cry out, sometimes loud enough for the living to hear, begging for entrance into the realm of the dead. This, the friends said, meant that the other side was not yet ready to receive him. The paperwork of death, so to speak, had not been completed. When the young man heard this explanation, he felt cold wind blow across his back, even though all the windows were closed. The hair on his arms stood straight up. It was as though a veil had been lifted, as though he suddenly understood something that had been right in front of him all along, yet invisible until that moment. He did not know whether to believe or disbelieve, but remembering his grandfather's contorted face, that urgent scream, his heart clenched with a dread he could not shake. On the night of the grandfather's death, the strangeness reached its peak. He began drifting in and out of lucidity, no longer recognizing the family members who had gathered around his bed. The family made a decision. In Chinese tradition, it is considered improper, even dangerous, for a person to die away from home. The soul might become lost, unable to find its way back to join the ancestors. They rushed the old man home, carrying him through dark streets to die where he belonged, in the house his family had lived in for generations. Once home, the grandfather suddenly demanded to be lifted up. He wanted to examine the bedboards beneath him. "The boards," he gasped. "They're burning. Too hot, the boards are too hot." The family touched the wooden planks. They were not hot at all. If anything, they felt cool to the touch. But the old man insisted, his voice cracking with urgency. In Chinese underworld mythology, there are realms of punishment, places where the wicked are made to endure flames for their misdeeds in life. Was the grandfather already feeling those fires? After examining the bed, the old man began to shout again. "Open the door! Hurry! Open the door!" The family rushed to obey, pulling open every door in the house, but the doors were already open. Still, the old man stared at some point in space and screamed for them to be opened. Then his cries changed. "Move aside! Everyone get out of the way! Don't block the door!" His voice was frantic, as though something invisible to everyone else was trying to enter through that doorway, and the family members were blocking its path. The grandmother was weeping now. She clutched her husband's hand and spoke through her tears. "You are glimpsing the road now. You will leave us tonight." The old people know. These strange behaviors, the distant staring, the cries about doors and burning beds, they are all signs that the soul is preparing to depart. The dying person is no longer entirely in the world of the living. The grandfather's eyes grew unfocused, glazing over like frost spreading across a window. Yet his lips continued to move, mumbling words that grew quieter and quieter. The family gathered close, pressed against the bed, afraid to leave his side even for a moment. The room fell silent except for the old man's labored breathing and the grandmother's muffled sobs. The minutes crawled by. The night deepened. Outside the window, the darkness was absolute. Not even the insects dared to sing. Just after 11 o'clock, the grandfather's eyes suddenly snapped wide open. He stared directly at the doorway with an expression that made everyone's blood run cold. Those eyes were not looking at any living person. They were fixed upon something that had come to collect him, something that only he could see. Then his lips moved slightly. It looked almost like he was nodding to someone, acknowledging something, accepting, and then his eyes closed. His chest fell still. The grandfather was gone. The grandmother collapsed over the bed, her wails tearing through the silent house. The other family members stood frozen, tears streaming down their faces. The young man said that in that moment he finally understood what his grandfather had seen. Not a road visible to the living, but a path that only those about to depart can perceive. A road of no return, a one-way journey into the unknown. During the funeral, many elderly villagers came to pay their respects. They had heard about the grandfather's strange behavior in his final days, the scratching, the staring, the screaming about doors. The old villagers nodded knowingly. "This is Wang Lu," they said. His time had come. He saw the road. One particularly ancient man, his face a map of wrinkles, his back bent with age, spoke up. He said he had witnessed this phenomenon many times throughout his long life. It was always the same. Some of the dying glimpse the road. Others smell it. Some hear someone calling their name, a voice that seems to come from very far away, and still others see relatives who have been dead for years standing at the foot of their bed, waiting to escort them. The ancient man said these things are not superstition. They are simply realities that the living cannot perceive. The veil between worlds exists, and in those final hours it grows thin enough for the dying to peer through. The young man thought about this for a long time afterward. If his grandfather truly saw that road, what did it look like? Was it yellow dust, ancient flagstones, an endless corridor of shadow? And when the old man screamed for the door to be opened, had he truly seen a door? What waited on the other side? These questions have no answers. No living person can say what lies beyond that threshold. But the strange events of those final days were undeniably real, witnessed by an entire family. The listener wrote that this experience changed his understanding of death. "Perhaps it is not an ending at all," he said, "but merely the beginning of another journey. And those things we cannot see, just because they remain invisible to us, does not mean they do not exist." After the grandfather's death, the grandmother would often wake in the middle of the night. She said she had dreamed of him. In her dreams, the grandfather looked healthy and at peace, nothing like the pained, desperate man in those final days. He even smiled at her. Once she dreamed he spoke to her. "I am well," he said. "Do not worry about me." When she woke, her pillow was wet with tears. She told the family. He walked that road. He reached the other side. He is at peace now. From that day forward, the family never again dismissed the idea of Wen Wang Lu as mere superstition. They had witnessed with their own eyes the strange things that occur when a soul prepares to leave its body. These things cannot be explained by medicine. They cannot be proven by science. And yet they happened in ordinary homes, to ordinary families, on ordinary nights. The young man wrote that whenever he passes a hospital now, he thinks of his grandfather. He remembers the desperate scratching, the fixed stare into the distance, the anguished cries of "open the door." Those images are carved into his memory. They have become his most direct understanding of the threshold between life and death. The elders speak truth. Before death, a person truly can glimpse the road, a path visible only to those whose time has come. We who live cannot see it. But that does not mean it is not there. It waits, patient and eternal, for each of us to take our turn upon it. And so ends our first tale, my friends. A story of Fun Wanglu, of glimpsing the road that only the dying may see. Whether you believe or not, these things exist. They wait quietly in the shadows until your time comes. And when it does, only then will you understand. But the night is still young, and I have another story to tell. This one concerns trees, tombs, and the terrible price of greed. There are certain things in this world that one must never touch. Things that belong to the dead. Things that protect the living from powers they cannot comprehend. Those who ignore these warnings, they pay. Oh, how they pay. Let me tell you about a village in the mountains, and the old customs that bound its people to their ancestors across generations. The radio crackles softly, static hissing like whispers from beyond. We pause here, my friends, at the threshold of our second tale, the story of the tomb trees and the contractor who learned that some things cannot be bought, and some debts can only be paid in blood. When we return, we descend into darkness. In that remote mountain village, there existed an ancient custom. When a family member passed away and was laid to rest, the family would plant a tree beside the grave. These were not ordinary trees. The villagers believed that the roots would intertwine with the bones of the deceased, drawing their essence upward through the trunk and into the leaves. In this way, the ancestors lived on not as ghosts, but as guardians. The healthier the tree grew, the more prosperous the descendants would become. The tree was a bridge between the living and the dead. Some of these tomb trees had stood for over a century, their trunks so thick that 3 men linking arms could not encircle them. Their roots had drunk deep of the soil where generations lay buried. The villagers treated these trees with the same reverence they showed their ancestors. To harm a tomb tree was to harm the dead themselves, an offense that could bring catastrophe upon entire bloodlines. One year, a construction crew arrived in the village. They had come to build roads, lay pipes, modernize the infrastructure. The work would take many months. The crew was led by a middle-aged man, a contractor from the city. He wore expensive suits and drove a foreign car. His eyes had the hungry gleam of someone who saw profit in everything. After 6 months, the construction was complete. The crew prepared to leave, but on his final walk through the village, the contractor's eyes fell upon the hillside cemetery and the magnificent trees that stood sentinel over the graves. In the cities, wealthy men paid fortunes for such trees. Mature specimens with perfect forms could fetch tens of thousands, enough to transplant into private gardens as status symbols. The contractor's greed ignited. Why let such valuable trees rot in a rural cemetery when they could grace the estates of the rich? Under cover of the final days of construction, he ordered his excavators to the cemetery. They dug up one of the most magnificent specimens, a tree that had guarded the Wang family tomb for over 100 years. The machine tore through soil that had been undisturbed for generations. Roots that had embraced the bones of ancestors were ripped from the earth. The tree was loaded onto a truck and spirited away in the night. The contractor brought the tree to his own estate in the city. He spent a small fortune having it transplanted into his private garden, where it stood like a trophy of his cunning. 2 days after the tree was planted, the contractor's wife went mad. She woke at dawn and walked into the garden. When the household staff found her, she was circling the tree, walking round and round in an endless loop, her eyes vacant, her lips slack. They tried to stop her. They grabbed her arms, called her name, shook her, but she pushed past them with unnatural strength and continued her endless orbit around the stolen tree. Her eyes were not her own. They stared at nothing, or perhaps at something that only she could see. Her movements were mechanical, puppet-like, as though strings were pulling her limbs. She walked until she collapsed from exhaustion, but after a brief rest on the ground, she rose again and resumed her circling. The contractor was terrified. On the 3rd day, his young son began circling the tree as well. By the 4th day, his teenage daughter had joined them. 3 members of his family, walking in an endless loop around the tree like planets, orbiting a malevolent sun. They could not be stopped. They could not be reasoned with. They simply walked. The neighbors grew frightened. They would peer over the wall and see the family walking in their terrible circle, hour after hour, faces blank, legs moving with mechanical precision. The contractor tried everything. He called doctors. They could find nothing physically wrong. He summoned priests. They burned incense and chanted. But the circling continued. In desperation, he found a Taoist master, a true practitioner, not a temple charlatan. The moment the old man entered the garden and saw the tree, his face went gray. "Where did you get this tree?" the master demanded, his voice cut like a blade. "Tell me the truth, or I will leave this place and never return." The contractor fell to his knees and confessed everything: the village, the tomb, the midnight theft. The Taoist master shook his head slowly. "You fool. This tree has drunk the essence of the dead for 100 years. Its roots have embraced their bones. You did not steal a tree, you tore the ancestors from their resting place. Your family is walking the Yellow Springs Road," the master continued. "They are being pulled toward death. The ancestors whose tree you stole are dragging them down to the underworld. In Chinese belief, the Yellow Springs Huangquan is the underworld realm where souls go after death. It is a place of judgment and purgatory. To walk its road while still alive is to be pulled toward death itself." The contractor was sobbing now. "What can I do? How can I save them?" The master's answer was simple but terrible. "The tree must be returned. Not tomorrow, not next week, now, this very day. And you must beg forgiveness from the family whose ancestors you have disturbed. But even that may not be enough," the master added. "If the ancestors' anger is too great, your family will progress from circling to climbing, and once they climb the tree, they will not come down alive." The contractor did not hesitate. He ran for his car, still in his rumpled clothes, and drove toward the village at dangerous speed. Meanwhile, in the village, Old Wang had made a disturbing discovery. He had gone to his family's ancestral tomb to burn paper offering spirit money that the dead could use in the afterlife. But when he reached the tomb, he saw only a great wound in the earth where the tree had stood. The ancient guardian of his ancestors had been torn away, leaving nothing but a pit of disturbed soil and severed roots. Old Wang let out a cry of rage and grief. He had tended that tree since childhood. His father had tended it before him, and his grandfather before that. 4 generations of Wang ancestors rested in that soil. He knew immediately who was responsible. Only the construction crew had the equipment to uproot such a massive tree, but they had already left the village. That night, strange things began to happen in Old Wang's house. Spirit money began appearing throughout the home. In Chinese funeral tradition, relatives burn paper currency, Waiming Bio, or underworld money, so that the deceased can use it in the afterlife. It is only ever seen at funerals and tomb sweeping ceremonies. Old Wang would wake to find spirit money on his breakfast table. He would return home to find it scattered across his bed. It fluttered down from the ceiling like autumn leaves. The message was clear. His ancestors were furious. Their guardian had been stolen, their rest disturbed. They were sending a warning, a demand for justice. Old Wang did not know what to do. He burned offerings at the damaged tomb, begging his ancestors for patience. But the spirit money kept appearing, more and more each day. The villagers began to whisper. Something dark had awakened. The theft of the tomb tree had opened a door between worlds that should have remained closed. Then the contractor arrived. He burst from his car and ran through the village, wild-eyed and desperate, asking everyone he met, whose family tomb is missing a tree. "Please, I must find them." Someone pointed him toward Old Wang's house. The contractor ran to the door and fell to his knees before the bewildered farmer. Before Old Wang could speak, the contractor slapped himself across the face once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed through the quiet village. "It was me," he sobbed. "I stole your tree. I'm a fool, a criminal, a man without ancestors. Please forgive me. Please let me return it." Old Wang's first instinct was rage. He wanted to beat this city man who had desecrated his family's sacred ground. But the contractor's terror was too genuine to ignore. "Why?" Old Wang demanded. "Why do you come crawling back now? What happened to you?" The contractor poured out his story. The tree in his garden, his wife beginning to circle it, then his children joining her, the endless walking, the vacant eyes. The Taoist master's terrible warning. "They're walking the Yellow Springs Road," he gasped. "The master said if they start climbing the tree, they'll die. Please, I'll give you anything. I'll pay any price. Just let me return the tree." The contractor pulled out everything he had: a checkbook, wads of cash, a gold-plated business card. He threw them at Old Wang's feet like offerings on an altar. Old Wang looked at the money without interest. He had never seen a check before and did not know what it was. But as he listened to the contractor's story, something clicked in his mind. The spirit money appearing in his house, the ancestors' rage, and now this city man's family cursed to walk in endless circles around the stolen tree. The ancestors had not merely sent warnings, they had enacted their own punishment. They had reached across the boundary between worlds to curse the thief's family. Old Wang's anger faded. In its place came something close to pity. This foolish, greedy man had disturbed forces he could not comprehend, and now his entire family was paying the price. "Keep your money," Old Wang said quietly, "but you must bring the tree back today. Not one branch can be missing, and you must plant it exactly where it stood before." The contractor nodded frantically, already reaching for his phone to summon trucks and equipment. That afternoon, a large flatbed truck rolled into the village bearing the stolen tree. The villagers gathered to watch, whispering among themselves. The contractor personally supervised every moment of the replanting. He screamed at workers who handled the roots too roughly. He measured the hole obsessively to ensure the tree would sit at exactly its original depth. As the sun began to set, the tree was finally back in its place. Its roots once again embraced the soil where the Wang ancestors rested. The wound in the earth had been healed. Old Wang approached the tomb. He lit 3 sticks of incense, the traditional number for addressing ancestors, and knelt in the fresh soil. "Ancestors," he said softly, "the tree has returned. Your guardian is back in its rightful place. Please, let your anger rest." The contractor fell to his knees beside Old Wang. He pressed his forehead to the dirt and kowtowed deeply, the most profound gesture of respect and apology in Chinese culture. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I was blinded by greed. I violated your sacred ground. Please forgive me. Please release my family." He kowtowed again and again, his forehead striking the earth with audible thuds. Each impact was an act of submission, an acknowledgement of his crime against the dead. Then something happened. The contractor felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. His vision darkened at the edges. His limbs went slack. He collapsed face first onto the grave, unconscious. Old Wang rushed to help, fearing the worst. But after a moment, the contractor's eyes fluttered open. He sat up slowly, confusion written across his face. "What happened?" he asked. "Why am I on the ground?" Before anyone could answer, his phone began to ring. It was the household staff calling from the city. The voice on the other end was crying, but they were tears of joy. "Sir, your wife, she stopped. She just stopped walking and fell asleep on the grass. Your children too, they're sleeping now. They're not circling anymore." The contractor broke down in sobs of relief. His family was freed. The curse had been lifted. He turned to the grave and kowtowed 3 more times, each bow filled with genuine gratitude rather than mere desperation. "Thank you," he whispered to the ancestors. "Thank you for showing mercy." Old Wang helped him to his feet. "Go home to your family," the old farmer said, "and remember what you learned today. Some things are not for the taking." The contractor nodded, still overcome with emotion. Then he paused. "Let me make things right," he said. "Not with money, but with work." He confessed that during the original construction project, he had cut corners everywhere, used cheap materials, taken shortcuts that would cause problems within years. The radio signal wavers, static rising like whispers from the grave. We pause again, my friends. The contractor's redemption has begun, but the night holds one more twist. When we return, we discover that his sins ran deeper than even he remembered. and that the ancestors' justice was far from complete. The contractor vowed to redo every piece of shoddy work his crew had left behind. He would rebuild the roads properly. He would replace the faulty pipes. He would do it all at his own expense, a penance for his greed. Old Wang nodded approvingly. That is more like it. That is how a real man makes amends. The very next day, the contractor's workers returned, but this time with quality materials and honest intentions. He supervised every detail personally, ensuring nothing was cut short. The village school was rebuilt from the ground up. New classrooms with proper foundations, sturdy desks and chairs, windows that actually sealed against the winter cold. Days passed. The contractor stayed in the village, sleeping in a humble guest house, eating simple farmer's food. He had changed. His silence was answer enough. Old Wang released his arm and stumbled backward. "How many?" he demanded. "How many trees did you steal?" The contractor's face contorted with shame. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat like bones. Old Wang spun around and shouted to the village, "Everyone, go check your family tombs. See if your trees are still there." The village erupted into chaos. Men and women ran toward the hillside cemetery, their feet pounding the dirt paths. Children were left crying in doorways. Dogs barked at the sudden commotion. The contractor stood paralyzed in the street, his redemption crumbling around him like ash. Within minutes, the screams began. They came from every direction, cries of anguish and fury echoing down the mountainside. One family's tree was gone, then another and another. 7 families. 8 families. The count kept rising. At least 8 ancestral trees had been stolen from the cemetery. 8 families whose ancestors had been violated. 8 bloodlines whose guardians had been ripped from the earth. The villagers came back down the mountain like an angry tide. Their faces were masks of grief and rage. Some carried farm tools, some carried stones. They surrounded the contractor. Someone shoved him. Someone else spat at his feet. The air crackled with violence waiting to happen. "I'll kill him," one man screamed. "He desecrated my grandmother's grave. Call the police." A woman shrieked. "No, the police are too good for him. Let the ancestors deal with him." Old Wang pushed through the crowd, arms raised. "Stop! Stop! Killing him won't bring the trees back." The mob hesitated. Old Wang's voice carried the weight of his years. "Make him bring them all back," Old Wang said firmly. "Every single tree. Then we let the ancestors decide his fate." Contractor was weeping openly now, snot running down his face. "I sold them," he sobbed. "I sold them to rich people in the city, different buyers. I don't even remember all the addresses." A terrible silence fell over the crowd. The trees were scattered across the city, in the gardens of strangers who had no idea what they had purchased. "Then you will find them," Old Wang said, his voice like iron. "Every last one. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how much it costs. You will find those trees and return them to their rightful places." The contractor nodded frantically. "I will. I swear it. No matter what it takes." "But what about the people who bought them?" someone asked. "They have the trees now. What is happening to their families?" The crowd fell silent again. The contractor had only experienced the curse because he had stolen Old Wang's tree and planted it in his own garden. But what of the innocent buyers? They had not stolen anything. They had simply purchased beautiful old trees through normal channels, never knowing their terrible origin. Would the ancestors' curse fall upon them as well? Were their families across the city even now, beginning to circle stolen trees in their gardens, their eyes going blank, their feet unable to stop? No one knew the answer. No one could know. The ancestors' ways were their own. The contractor left the village that day with a burden heavier than any he had ever carried. He had trees to find, scattered across an entire city, families to warn, ancestors to appease. Whether he succeeded in returning all the trees, that, my friends, I cannot say. The listener who sent this story did not know the ending. Perhaps there is no ending yet. Perhaps it continues still. And so, my friends, we come to the end of tonight's journey through the shadows. 2 stories. 2 glimpses into the thin veil between the living and the dead. First told us of Fin Wang Lu, the road that only the dying can see. That invisible path that unfurls before us in our final hours, leading somewhere we cannot imagine until our time comes. The second reminded us that the dead do not forget. The trees planted on their graves are not mere decoration. They are bridges between worlds, guardians that watch over their descendants, roots that intertwine with the bones of those who came before. To disturb such things is to invite consequences beyond imagination. The ancestors do not forgive easily. Their justice is patient, but absolute. There are rules in this world, my friends. Rules older than any law written by human hands. Rules that govern the relationship between the living and the dead. You may choose not to believe in such things. That is your right. But the disbelief of the living does not trouble the dead. They know what they know. They see what they see. And when someone crosses the line, when someone takes what should not be taken, disturbs what should not be disturbed, they act. Greed is a dangerous thing, my friends. It blinds us to consequences. It makes us forget that some things have prices that cannot be paid in money. The contractor learned this lesson. He learned it through the bodies of his wife and children, circling that stolen tree like satellites trapped in a dying orbit. Perhaps he is still searching now, still tracking down the trees he scattered across the city, still trying to undo what cannot be fully undone. And somewhere in the cities, in gardens of the wealthy and unsuspecting, those stolen trees still stand. Their roots remember the graves they once guarded. Their branches reach toward ancestors who can no longer feel their shade. If you ever see such a tree, an ancient giant, that seems to belong somewhere else, somewhere older and more sacred, perhaps you should ask where it came from. And if you ever feel the urge to walk in circles around it, run as fast as you can, and pray the ancestors show you mercy. The night falls silent once more, my friends. The hour grows late, and the shadows lengthen. But you know where to find me when the darkness calls again. Subscribe, my friends, so that Netherwave Radio may reach you the next time the moon bleeds red. Share these tales with those brave enough to listen. Leave your comments below. Tell me of the strange things you have witnessed. I am Damien Tao. Until we meet again, sleep carefully. And if you wake in the night with the urge to walk in circles, resist. For once you start, you may never stop. Good night.